We are jumping straight in today. We're going to unpack a case that really seized the national conversation back in late 2022.
Yeah.
The horrific murders of 4 students near the University of Idaho campus.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just, a story about immense tragedy, although it certainly is that. 4 young lives just extinguished suddenly, violently in one night.
It was shocking.
But this deep dive is also about a case that, well, it exposed this really chilling contradiction right at the heart of studying crime itself.
Right. I mean, the initial shock, that was understandable. A violent crime like this in a, pretty quiet college town is rare enough.
Yeah.
But what really pushed it into this, national fixation was the identity of the person they eventually charged.
Exactly.
After 47 days, really intense days of searching, the sole suspect they arrested.
Yeah.
He wasn't, let's say, a typical offender profile.
Not at all.
He was a high-achieving doctoral candidate in criminology.
Criminology, the study of crime.
Precisely. And that fact alone, that the person dedicated to understanding crime, maybe even preventing it, became the accused perpetrator. That just sent these seismic waves of confusion and, frankly, fear across the whole country.
It really does create this ultimate analytical challenge, doesn't it? How do you reconcile the meticulous student of crime with, well, carrying out something so horrific?
It's deeply unsettling.
So our mission today is to move past the headlines. We're going to try and unpack the harrowing timeline, get into the details of that almost unbelievable lack of evidence, that void that initially stalled things.
Right, the early stages?
Yeah, and then trace the 47-day hunt that followed.
Yeah.
And we'll spend a good chunk of time analyzing the, let's say, confounding profile of the killer and the biggest paradox of the whole thing, the surviving eyewitness.
Yeah, that's key. So to start, we really have to go back to that night, November 13th, 2022.
Mm-hmm.
4 University of Idaho students killed in an off-campus house. And the sources, they describe the violence as just relentless, utterly brutal.
That sounds horrific.
Multiple students stabbed, slashed, often, apparently, while they were sleeping. It suggests a sudden, overwhelming, just terrifying assault.
So not a struggle that alerted everyone immediately.
It seems swift, executed with extreme prejudice, you could say. And that immediately told investigators, look, this probably isn't a typical crime of passion or some spontaneous act gone wrong.
The brutality itself sent a message.
Yeah, it suggests focus, intent. Yeah.
And then the immediate aftermath. It sounds like it presented investigators with a unique kind of nightmare.
It did.
They arrive at this devastating scene, obviously, but also a perplexing scientific puzzle.
Exactly. Because despite that horrific violence, which, you'd instinctively assume would leave just tons of physical trace evidence everywhere.
Blood, fibers, something.
Right. But the investigation in its first phase faced this huge challenge, an initial, really shocking lack of conventional evidence.
That's the part that's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. It distinguishes this crime scene early on. For a crime this severe, officers would absolutely expect blood, hair, fibers, fingerprints, footprints, potentially all over the place.
Standard procedure, standard fines.
But the initial reports indicated this disconcerting emptiness. Specifically, the sources mentioned police struggle initially to find clear footprints leading to or from the house.
Wow.
No obvious fingerprints left behind anywhere. Critically, the initial DNA collection didn't yield an immediate hit, no match in the system, and the murder weapon,
the knife
used in the stabbings, completely absent, vanished.
Okay, wait. Just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
You have this scene of just massive physical devastation.
Unimaginable.
But forensically, it's almost minimal, at least initially. What does that tell investigators right off the bat?
It tells them something crucial about the perpetrator. It suggests they possessed a high degree of what we call operational awareness.
Meaning they knew what police would look for.
Or at least had thought about it. This didn't look sloppy or panicked, not in terms of the evidence trail initially. It suggested calculation. Someone planning multiple stabbings knows, blood spatter, contact points, they're inevitable.
Right.
So the absence of obvious evidence implies countermeasures were likely taken.
Like what? Protective gear.
Precisely. That lack of standard physical evidence suggests the perpetrator either wore extensive protective gear, gloves, definitely, shoe coverings, maybe, even possibly a full suit. though that's speculation.
Or cleaned up meticulously.
Or, yeah, or they were incredibly careful, maybe even meticulously cleaned up the most obvious traces immediately afterward. This complicated the initial path of the investigation hugely.
Because there were no quick hits.
Exactly. Police couldn't rely on those immediate forensic wins, like getting a fingerprint match or a clear DNA profile in the first hours or days. The killer had, essentially, kind of created a clean slate, forensically speaking.
At least on the surface.
Right. Turning the investigation into this slow, arduous collection process, focusing on, microscopic trace evidence rather than those obvious leads you hope for.
And the psychological impact of that clean void on the community must have been just enormous.
Oh, absolutely.
It suggests this almost phantom killer, someone meticulous, capable, and seemingly untraceable, just melting away into the night.
It definitely intensified the fear, because the killer wasn't identified quickly by some careless mistake, They seem to have planned their exit just as carefully as their attack.
A chilling thought.
And that dread, that uncertainty, it led directly into what the sources call the long silence.
The 47 days.
That 47-day period, stretching between the murders and the eventual arrest. This was a time of just intense public anxiety. And behind the scenes, this arduous evidence collection effort was underway, probably unparalleled in scope for a case like this in that area.
So what were they doing if the obvious stuff wasn't there?
Well, police had to shift their focus, right? Away from that low-hanging fruit, the fingerprints and footprints, to a really painstaking examination of digital footprints, surveillance footage, complex trace evidence, things that take time.
47 days. I mean, that is an eternity. When a community is paralyzed by the fear that a highly effective violent killer is still out there, walking free.
It really is. And during this time, every single piece of potential evidence, every digital ping from a phone, every tiny fiber they recovered, every obscure vehicle sighting on some distant camera, it all had to be isolated, documented, scientifically processed.
And you're talking about using methods that, that a criminology PhD would be intimately familiar with.
That's the irony, isn't it? Advanced digital forensics, microscopic analysis, these are the tools of the trade he was studying.
So the investigation really pivoted hard towards technology then.
It seems so. Without those immediate physical markers, they lean heavily on things like cell phone data pings, tracking vehicle movements, stitching together bits of surveillance video from homes and businesses in the surrounding areas.
Looking for anomalies.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how that methodical, tech-heavy approach eventually started to pay off. It began creating a digital profile, if not a physical one initially.
Like a car.
Like the specific white sedan. That became crucial. It had been seen near the house during those critical early morning hours around the time of the murders. That became a major focus.
So the lack of physical evidence basically forced them to hunt the killer through their operational mistakes in the digital and visual world instead.
In a way, yes. But the true, really stunning turning point, the pivot that arguably broke the case wide open and solidified the whole narrative, it wasn't digital at all.
What was it?
It was the revelation of a human link, a person.
Oh.
Absolutely. When the affidavit, the court documents, were later unsealed and made public, they contained this one detail that just instantly became the centerpiece of the entire case.
The twist.
The existence of a direct eyewitness.
Inside the house.
Inside the house. One of the surviving roommates, not one of the victims who was there during the attack, was documented as having actually seen the perpetrator during the incident itself.
Okay, let's absorb that for a moment. In a house where 4 people were brutally murdered,
yeah,
a 5th person saw the killer. Maybe not perfectly, but saw them. Face to face or close enough?
Close enough, it seems, to provide crucial details. The affidavit described her seeing a figure clad in black clothing and a mask walking past her. She described the person's build tall, athletically built, but not muscular, and crucially, saw them walk towards the backsliding glass door.
Wow. That completely transforms the investigation, doesn't it?
Completely.
You go from hunting a ghost based on, maybe some microscopic fibers and car footage,
right,
to having a highly specific physical description from someone who was there.
It was a monumental shift. That human memory, that human sighting, it became the linchpin. The existence of this eyewitness drastically validated the investigative path they were already heading down with the car and other leads.
It connected the dots.
It allowed police to match the digital trails, the forensic evidence, like the trace DNA that was later recovered from a knife sheath found at the scene.
So they did find some DNA eventually.
Yes, a crucial piece on that sheath left behind. not initially obvious, but found during the meticulous search. And the eyewitness account helped link all that, the car, the DNA, the timeline, to a single individual with much greater confidence.
It bridged the gap created by that initial clean crime scene.
Exactly. It provided the human context for all the circumstantial and scientific evidence they were gathering over those 47 days.
And that meticulous linking, the digital trail of the white sedan, the trace DNA from the sheath, and crucially, the eyewitness description. That all culminated, finally, after 47 days.
In the arrest, the culmination of that long hunt, the arrest of a single, and as we've said, highly unique suspect.
And this brings us right back to the core paradox of this whole deep dive, doesn't it? The profile of the individual arrested, the man taken into custody. He wasn't some unknown drifter or someone with a long, obvious criminal record. He was, as you said, highly visible, highly educated, within the very field dedicated to studying crime.
It's the central, almost unbelievable twist.
So let's really focus on that profile, because it's not just that he was a student, he was a doctoral candidate.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what that actually means? What level of expertise are we talking about for a PhD candidate in criminology?
Okay, yeah, it's important to understand the level. A doctoral candidate, a PhD student, especially in a field like criminology or criminal justice, they're operating at basically the absolute pinnacle of academic study in that field.
Beyond a master's degree.
Well beyond. They've typically finished all their required coursework. They've passed rigorous, comprehensive exams, testing their knowledge across the entire field, and they're usually deep into conducting independent, complex research, original research.
Aimed at what?
Aimed at creating new knowledge, pushing the boundaries of understanding in areas like policing tactics, forensic science applications, victimology studies, criminal psychology, patterns of offending.
And they often teach, too, right?
Often, yes. They might be teaching assistants or even instructors for undergraduate courses. They're expected to be the next generation of experts, the future professors, researchers, high-level policy analysts in the criminal justice system.
Okay, so the person arrested for one of the most brutal and initially baffling crimes of the year had, theoretically, the deepest possible academic understanding of exactly how that crime would be investigated.
That's it. That's the core of why the sources noted that this fact that a doctoral candidate was charged shocked the entire U.S. It just turns the whole field, the whole idea of studying crime to prevent it completely on its head.
It's profoundly disturbing.
It is. And what's fascinating in a very dark way is how his advanced academic knowledge could have potentially informed his actions.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you study police procedure in depth, you know the standard protocols, but you also learn about the potential weak points, the loopholes, the things that can hinder an investigation.
Right.
If you study forensic science, you know precisely how DNA is collected, how easily it can be transferred, and maybe how to avoid leaving testable fingerprints or DNA.
So he'd know the playbook.
A PhD candidate in criminology would absolutely know the methodologies police use to build a suspect profile, to track movements, to collect evidence, and therefore, theoretically, they'd know how to construct a counterprofile, how to behave, what actions to avoid to minimize suspicion.
Which brings us back to the crime scene. That meticulousness we talked about, the initial evidence void.
It suddenly looks different, doesn't it?
Yeah. It suggests it wasn't just luck or accident. It could have been potentially the practical application of his academic specialization, applying his knowledge precisely to evade capture.
It's a deeply chilling possibility. And this is where that insight about calculation really comes into play. There were reports, later emerging, suggesting a pattern of premeditation that went beyond just, basic planning.
What kind of reports?
There were revelations that the suspect had reportedly engaged in online activity, maybe on forums or social media, potentially posing questions to other users or maybe just researching topics. That essentially boiled down to asking how to commit a crime like this, or maybe more specifically, how to get away with it.
He was researching it, like a project.
The allegations suggest research concerning methods, maybe even specifically related to the type of crime or victims involved. It points towards potential planning and research, possibly informed directly by his field of study.
Wow, that detail.
Yeah.
That really sticks with you, doesn't it?
It does.
It transforms the act from, say, a sudden explosion of rage into something far more terrifying, like a research project gone horrifically wrong.
If he was researching specific methods, specific ways to avoid detection, he was potentially using his academic skill set, that ability to gather information, synthesize different theories, maybe even test hypotheses mentally for the absolute worst possible purpose.
It's like the inversion of the scientific method.
That's a good way to put it. It forces us to analyze his alleged planning, not just as basic criminal intent, but potentially as intellectual preparation. He wasn't just learning how to potentially commit the act, maybe, but learning the operational risks, the legal consequences, the specific investigative processes that would inevitably follow.
It makes his high achievement, his academic success, seem less like a professional milestone and more like a sign of calculated, terrifying preparation.
It's a disturbing lens through which to view it, absolutely.
Okay. This high level of intellectual engagement, this supposed calculation and planning, it makes the single most baffling detail of the entire case all the more incomprehensible. And that's the question that the source material specifically flags as the central paradox. The one thing that just doesn't seem to fit the profile of a meticulous planner.
Why did the killer spare the eyewitness?
Exactly. Why did the killer spare the eyewitness roommate?
This is it. This is the critical, fundamental contradiction in the narrative, isn't it?
It feels like it.
If the suspect was truly this high-intellect criminology PhD candidate, someone presumably capable of meticulous planning, who maybe successfully executed 4 brutal murders while managing, at least initially, to minimize obvious physical evidence, how? How could he then make what seems like such a catastrophic operational mistake?
Leaving the single person alive who could potentially identify him.
Yes, to leave alive the one person who saw him inside the house.
How do we even begin to reconcile those two halves of the story? You have the meticulous planner cleaning the scene, avoiding prints, and then the person who apparently walks right past a crucial witness and just leaves.
For someone allegedly trained in criminal justice, criminal behavior, the absolute necessity of eliminating witnesses, especially in a crime this severe. That's Criminology 101, isn't it?
It seems foundational.
And that's precisely why the sources frame this as the high-achieving student's unfathomable brain circuit. It's baffling. We have to try and analyze the possibilities, again, without assigning definitive motive or judgment, but just exploring logically how that breakdown could happen.
Okay, so possibility 1, just pure overwhelming panic, adrenaline dump.
Right. In a scenario of extreme, rapid, horrific violence, even the most meticulous planner is still human. They're subject to human physiological limits, stress responses.
Fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. The act itself, allegedly killing 4 people swiftly with a knife, is inherently chaotic, physically demanding, psychologically overwhelming. It's entirely possible that the killer, maybe having just completed his intended acts, experienced a kind of panic-driven disassociation. Or an adrenaline crash.
So he just didn't process her.
He might have simply failed to register the witness's presence clearly. Or perhaps, in the darkness, the speed of the exit may be moving through unfamiliar territory in the house. He genuinely thought he hadn't been seen clearly enough to be identified. Or maybe thought the witness was frozen in fear, incapacitated.
But the witness report, as described in the affidavit, sounds pretty clear. She saw him, described his mask, his build, saw him walk past her and towards the exit. That suggests a direct, even if fleeting, awareness.
It does suggest proximity, yeah. Which leads us to the second possibility. And this one is maybe more chilling because it speaks to the potential complexity of the suspect's alleged mindset.
Jeez.
Was it somehow a deliberate decision? Or maybe a subconscious, warped decision?
To let her live.
Or at least not to engage.
Wow.
Given his supposed intellectual capacity, that decision or non-decision to spare the witness, it has to be analyzed. Did the PhD candidate in this alleged moment of extreme violence suddenly hit some kind of psychological wall?
Like a limit.
Perhaps. Maybe a warped ethical boundary kicked in, even for him, where killing 4 was somehow possible within his frame, but actively confronting and killing the 5th face-to-face maybe was psychologically unbearable in that moment.
That suggests, wow, like a fragment of something, restraint or a boundary, inside someone who had just allegedly committed such an act of extreme cruelty.
It's a terrifying layer of complexity to consider. If he studied criminal minds, maybe he developed some kind of internal theory about his own limits, his own breaking points. It's purely speculative, of course.
Or Third possibility.
Extreme hubris, extreme arrogance, maybe linked directly to his academic background.
How so?
Did he believe his planning was so sophisticated, his cleanup so effective, his operational security, avoiding cameras, etc., so sound, that the testimony of a single, likely traumatized eyewitness would ultimately be worthless, that it wouldn't be enough?
Like, they'll never be able to prove it was me, no matter what she says she saw.
Exactly that kind of thinking. Did he think, the science won't support her, there's no DNA linking me directly to her, no fingerprints, my alibi, my digital footprint elsewhere, it will hold up against one person's word?
That interpretation ties right back to that idea of the criminology expert inverting his knowledge, doesn't it?
It does.
He trusts the science, the lack of evidence he thinks he controlled, more than the unpredictable human element he didn't control.
Precisely. He trusts the lack of footprints over the potential power of eyewitness testimony in court. Regardless of the reason, though, whether it was panic, a psychological block, or sheer intellectual arrogance, that lack of action against that specific roommate, it became the ultimate, non-negotiable detail that helped secure the case against him.
The witness survived.
The witness survived. And their description, their citing, their eventual identification, it became the critical human link. The piece that bridged the investigative gap left by that initial lack of obvious physical evidence.
It's the catastrophic mistake, potentially, that undid what otherwise might have appeared, at least initially, to be a disturbingly well-planned crime.
Yeah. All the alleged sophistication, the entry, the exit, the lack of immediate forensic evidence, all that operational security became ultimately irrelevant because the killer failed to account for or neutralize one single human variable standing in a hallway.
The irony is just, it's crushing, really.
It is. The person who, theoretically, should have known the rules of the game best, who should have understood the investigative methods designed specifically to catch someone like him, allegedly made a singular error so profound, so fundamental, that it led directly to his identification and arrest 47 days later.
Okay, so let's just take a moment here to kind of summarize the sheer density and the contradictions of this case that we've walked through today. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
We have the swift, brutal murder of 4 young students in their home. Just devastating. We have the 47-day hunt that followed, defined, at least initially, by that shocking evidence void that suggested exceptional planning or care.
Right, the clean scene.
Then we identified the singular suspect as this criminology PhD candidate, a terrifying reversal of roles, someone who was allegedly researching criminal methods beforehand.
The ultimate insider, potentially.
And finally, the most shocking twist, maybe, the existence of the eyewitness who was spared, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We can't know, but who provided that key human piece of evidence that tied it all together?
Yeah, it remains a case just built entirely on these stark contrasts, doesn't it? High intellect versus extreme, almost primitive, low-tech violence with a knife, meticulous operational planning alleged, versus a critical, seemingly inexplicable lapse in witness management.
And the investigation didn't stop with the arrest, obviously.
No, not at all. Following the arrest, the case continued to see significant ongoing updates. Legal proceedings, further evidence analysis. Authorities worked diligently to build the full narrative, using the very forensic tools, the digital tracking, the legal procedures that the accused himself had studied so extensively.
The case is still unfolding in many ways.
It is.
And as we kind of close out this deep dive, this particular case, it forces us, I think, to carry a profoundly unsettling thought with us. We rely on the academic study of criminal behavior, criminology, psychology, sociology, to understand, maybe predict, and ultimately prevent violence. That's the goal.
That's the ideal goal, yes.
This incident presents such a dark anomaly. What happens when the deepest, most sophisticated academic understanding of crime is potentially leveraged not for prevention, but for meticulous execution?
It really challenges that fundamental assumption, doesn't it? The idea that education about crime is inherently protective or leads away from it.
Yeah.
If knowledge is power and an understanding investigative techniques, it certainly is, and that power is mastered by someone who also possesses a capacity for extreme violence, then the very systems we build to catch offenders, the procedures, the science, they become, in their eyes perhaps, merely complex blueprints for evasion.
So the final thought then.
This case really asks us to consider whether the most dangerous minds aren't just those driven by impulse or rage, but maybe also those who have spent years methodically studying the rules designed to catch them, only to turn that very knowledge into a weapon against society. It's a deeply disturbing question to ponder.